Greetings, I'm Scott Goldfein, Editor-in-Chief and Associate Publisher of Security Solution Integration. I thank you for joining me for this special COVID-19 Security Business Continuity Roundtable discussion. The objective is to provide strategies and guidance to owners, operators, and managers of security companies on how to best weather the present crisis, how to best come out of it and get back to operational capacity, and what product and service opportunities might emerge in the aftermath. My hope is that you, those you care about, and your business are getting through this ordeal as smoothly as possible, and that its ultimate impact will be as minimal as might be expected. On behalf of everyone at SSI and those participating on this call, our hearts, thoughts, and prayers go out to those suffering most and to those who have lost loved ones to this pandemic. Turning back to the business discussion at hand, I am pleased to welcome our panel. We're fortunate to have with us Matterhorn Consulting Principal and SSI Business Fitness columnist Paul Bascherl, Jacquelone Associates Principal and SSI Monitoring Matters columnist Peter Jacquelone, and Reitman Consulting Group Principal and SSI Advisory Board Member Mitch Reitman. We could not ask for a more experienced group of experts, and I thank each of them for participating. And here we go. So guys, what are three things that owners and operators of security dealer and integrator businesses should prioritize during the lockdown period? What I'd like to do is just I'll just go alphabetical. So let's go with Paul first, if you would.
Sure. From my perspective, there's a couple things that are kind of important, and that's reviewing the processes of how their companies are being run today. Now, most of the clients we work through process change, but that's like trying to change a tire on a car at 60 miles an hour. So everything is slowed down enough where owners should really be focused on what their processes look like as far as delivery of services, et cetera. I think this is really a key time to do that. The second piece that's really important is really to take a look at those processes and how many people do you really need to do the processes. So top grading your talent, people have had furloughs in the system integration side of the world and people have put people out. They're going to get a chance to stop and take a look at those processes. Then who do you really need to get those things done? And then finally, it's looking at their business model. If the business model is primarily driven by projects and the revenues is driven by projects and not an RMR component or a strong one, that's something they should really carefully look at. I'm sure those that don't have that today are looking at it right now. The people that are security dealers have such strong RMRs in their revenue streams. They're the ones that I have seen so far that are having the least financial impact on the situation.
Makes sense. Thank you. Peter, what do you got?
Yep. Well, I think the first thing, which is kind of obvious, is the health of their family and their team. I mean, obviously the family thing is obvious, but really the team and keeping it going forward, because as most know, that even as we come back, there's going to be a lot of apprehension in all kinds of interactions, movements, and social activities. So I think that it's really important, as I've seen some of the companies right now as we go through this, monitoring the health of their individuals, coming and going from work or even before work, whether it's temperature, whether it's symptoms, things like that. I think somehow, some way that's going to become part of a normal part of life, more so in some businesses than others. So I think that that's really important. And I think that that's something that, well, I know just in my conversations as an advisor, some organizations are dealing with right now. And they're saying it's not anything that's going to end once life goes back to what would be, quote unquote normal. So I think that that's a real important, first element. Other things, which again, are kind of obvious. I mean, I hate to state obvious things, but, replenishing their cash reserves, right? I mean, no matter what business they're in, as Paul mentioned, the folks that are, heavily weighted towards RMR, hopefully are feeling it less than the others that are project-based. And again, I speak to a variety of them. The ones that have blends, and depending upon where they are, have some, luck where they can, get some projects done even during this time. But I think you're going to see more look to kind of build their RMR. But most important, no matter where their business is, they're going to have to be building their cash reserves, moving forward, because they're all going to get impeded right now. And as both those things come together, you need to do all this by staying efficient. So I think, although most smart businesses are always looking at best practices of staying efficient. I believe that they're going to have to look at it just a bit deeper, so they could, hopefully improve their margins, provide a better service, but have that efficiency in place. So if they ever have to deal with something like this in the future, they may be a little bit more nimble on their feet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Peter. And Mitch, you've been keeping such close tabs on the intricacies of the financial relief and all that. What do you have for us here?
Well, it's kind of the best of times and the worst of times, and there's some opportunities out there. But the most important thing right now is to keep in touch with your customers, your banks, your whole business support team, and your customers especially, because this isn't a time to forget things and time to put things aside. Your customers need to know what's going on. They need to know you're still there, even if your employees may not be all there. It's definitely time to investigate some method of sending out blast emails to your customers, letting them know what's going on, and encouraging them. Especially a lot of my clients have restaurants and commercial businesses that are suffering a shutdown. Encourage them to call you if they're having some issues staying open and making your payments. If they're have inspections due but they've been deferred, to encourage them to contact you and talk to you. And I'd also encourage you to go to your customers and say, look, we'll defer a few payments for a few months. We know you're not operating. We know you're struggling. But when you do get back up and operating, we expect you to come back and be our customer and let us know what we can do to help you. The second thing is responding to service issues. Now more than ever is a time to make sure that you have the people and the ability to respond to staff issues and not just service issues, not just ignore it. Somebody calling for a service call not only needs service, but they're an opportunity to generate some revenue. And the last thing is, and some of the government programs are focused on this, do whatever you can to retain your talented people. If you have to cut everybody down to 30 hours a week, if you have to temporarily furlough some people, do that, because you don't want to drive your talented people off. Because I can tell you, like has been said already, there's going to be a lot of talent floating out there that has left some of the poor performing companies looking for a place to go. You need to let your employees know you're there for them. Your first commitment is to make sure that they're taken care of and that they still have a job. And if you take advantage of some of the programs that we've been talking about the last few weeks, the payroll protection program, some of the tax credits, some of the disaster loans, I've got clients call me that are saying, look, I just don't have enough work for these people, even if I keep them on the payroll, and pay them 25 or 30 hours a week. And if they're sitting at home, say, look, I want you to pick some classes, some ESA classes, some NICET classes, some classes somewhere, and take these classes and do some professional development. I expect to see you passing the tests. I expect to see you doing something. I'll continue to pay you, but it's not an excuse to watch I Love Lucy reruns, because if that happens, we're not going to make it as a team. So there's some opportunities here, and don't look at it as doom and gloom. Look at it as something that's short term. We're going to come back out of it, and the strong will not only survive, they'll prosper.
Very good. Thank you, Mitch. And we definitely will come out of it. We just don't know quite when. So, as we come out of it, what's some advice that you have for those companies, as they're getting back to ramping up and moving towards, operational capacity once again? So let's go back the other way, and I'll let Mitch jump in first on this one.
Well, the first thing you should prioritize is getting in touch with your customers and catching up on missed inspections, missed service calls, anything out there that is one, something that's customer service related, but two, to get you back in the revenue stream and get things going again. The other thing to do is to get your employees back working and get them back in the hang of going back into the office and getting work done. This is not a time to lose talent. I've kept my office open. I've told all my employees they don't have to come in. They are. They're coming in every day and working all day, but I told them if they feel uncomfortable or feel bad, they can stay home and still get paid. I don't want to do the process of rehiring all these people and trying to go find new talent. And you don't want to do that either with installers or service technicians or back office people. You don't want to have them leave and have to waste hours and hours and hours going back and rehiring people. Make sure that you retain your customers, but also make sure you retain your employees.
Mitch, I got to ask you about the SBA loan situation. Is that particularly an issue for the smaller firms out there?
It's another best and worst thing. I've been dealing for years with situations where the IRS will issue mandates for the IRS, with a Congress will issue mandates for the IRS, and they have no idea how to respond to them. But usually we had a year to year and a half to figure out what they're going to do. Congress passed this act just a little over 2 weeks ago with all kinds of requirements and benefits and provisions, and were very vague about how they're going to be administered. And the poor SBA has been struggling to keep up with this and give some assurance to people. And the biggest thing you need to remember about this payroll protection program, which I'm sure everybody sees all the information and stuff on social media and in the regular media, is the banks are administering it. The SBA has turned this entirely over to the banks, the credit decision, the underwriting, the administration, everything else. But the banks up until this past weekend have been unsure how they're going to get reimbursed and how much money was in the program. What we saw over the weekend was that the SBA finally started reserving funds for qualified borrowers. And so, for example, I had a couple clients this weekend that their bank sent them an email and said, we've gotten a number back from the SBA, which means your $100,000, your $80,000 or whatever has been earmarked and there's money reserved. We can make the loan to you. And if it's forgiven, we'll get our money back from the SBA. The SBA has given them 10 days to make the loan. And as long as they make the loan in that time, the loan is forgivable and out there. So the banks have started processing some of these loans. The other thing we've seen is, and to leave the politics out of it, there was a bill to authorize more money for the payroll protection program in Congress last Thursday, and it got derailed just for some petty bickering and some private projects. And so the Federal Reserve, in just an incredibly interesting event, said that we think this is important. To kind of give you a synopsis of the payroll protection program, the government feels like this situation is either going to be short-term and we'll be back out of it in 60 days and the layoffs and furloughs will stop and employees will get reemployed. Or if not, they're trying to ease the burden on these state unemployment offices. And so they're trying to spread this out over 60 days. So they've developed this payroll protection program to let companies keep people employed, even if they're not doing much, just to kind of tide over this recession and keep money flowing out to these employees and let businesses handle it. Well, the Fed said, we think this is going to be oversubscribed. We think they're going to run out of money fairly soon. So the Fed authorized another $250 billion that they're injecting into the economy. They're calling it the mainstream program, and it has some loan provisions, but it also, a lot of the money is going to shore up these payroll protection plan loans, program loans, so that the SBA can guarantee more of those. And then yesterday, for example, Texas authorized $50 million of payroll protection plan loans that the state is going to, I guess, in some way reimburse the banks or reimburse the SBA for these. So you're starting to see the government step up and put a lot of attention into these. A lot of people faced a hard reality that they never had, a lot of business owners, they never had developed a relationship with their banks. And so they passed this program. The banks had to make a loan. They weren't very monetarily good for the banks. It's a 1% interest rate that's deferred for 6 months. So the banks aren't making a lot of money on it. They didn't want to deal with strangers. They wanted to make sure they knew their customers. So there was a priority and a priority of who got the loans and who didn't get the loans. So the biggest complaint I've heard is that they're not getting a lot of response from their banks. Their banks aren't taking more applications. I'm hoping the government will keep feeding money into this system so there will be some available for lots of other small businesses that couldn't take advantage of it in the first round. And that for most businesses is really money from above that doesn't have to be reimbursed, can be used to pay your employees, and should keep us going. And again, getting back to, you don't want to get rid of your talented people. So the payroll protection plan is probably the best loan you can be pursuing. Even if your bank is running cold on you right now, stay on it and stay after it. The economic disaster loans are interesting, and there's a $10,000 forgivable portion, but you do have to pay that money back. And it is a loan, it is debt. So whatever you do, get educated on these two plans. If you have any questions, email us. But this is an opportunity to prosper through a crisis and come out stronger on the other end than you were going in.
Well, thank you for that, Mitch. We certainly hope that the smaller companies get through this okay and are able to access the help that's available to them. Peter, moving over to you. What three things or thereabouts do you see, owners and operators of these companies needing to focus on most to get back as close as they can to, normal?
Sure. In addition to what I said is the first item in the earlier question about maintaining a healthy team. I mean, now it's and what Mitch had said. Now you have to put your team back together, right? Because the work is there. You need to start fulfilling orders. So the reality of it is just trying to get that team back together. Make sure that their coordination is there. If you're rehiring, that's going to be a process. Like Mitch said, he doesn't want to have to go through that when this is over. So he's maintained this team. Others that didn't have that benefit. So now it's, that first thing they do is need to put their team together and make sure they're healthy, obviously. Then moving forward, have to make sure they're fulfilling any of the installations, non-essential service, and anything else that was postponed. And, trying to bring the company back to a healthy state. It's, in some organizations, it's going to be just as that. They're going to go from, just a cold start to a rapid start. And that could hurt some certain organizations. I mean, we've seen organizations that have started up with great opportunity during times that weren't bad and have hurt themselves because of the fact they came too quick. These are organizations that already existed, already have overhead, already have a variety of things that affect the business because they've been around, but they were just in a holding pattern. Now it's a matter of bringing those teams together, fulfilling those orders, getting the projects back online, making sure that just everybody's just well coordinated, and going through and trying to make this into something that you could look back to as building on a potential opportunity. Now they have to take a look at solutions, maybe solutions they haven't looked at in the past that maybe are more relevant right now, and make sure that those are presented to their clients and potential clients as beneficial solutions that would be beneficial during their daily lives, whether it's commercial or consumer residential, or obviously, if God forbid we ever had to go through anything that mirrored what we're going through right now. So I think that opportunity is going to open up for that, and it's not about ambulance chasing. It's not about trying to take benefit out of a bad situation. Sometimes bad situations anywhere in life, anywhere in history, opens the eyes of individuals of things that they should have had, or things they wanted to have and never really looked at it all that seriously. I think that what we're going through right now, because it's something like none of us in the world has ever been through, at least in the United States. You're going to take a look at technologies and look at different services that really make sense, that definitely bring efficiency to their individual families or their businesses on a regular basis, and clearly gives them a chance to react better if they have to go through a trying situation as this, or maybe something not as severe as this. So I think organizations really need to take a look at the various technologies that are kind of under their roof right now, or maybe technologies and services that are similar but they haven't offered before that their clients could benefit from.
Thank you, Peter. Paul, what are roughly three things that integrators should do to get their ducks in a row to get out of the gate after this lifts?
Well, to kind of touch base on what Peter said, and Mitch as well, is that it's really looking at, if this happens again, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to happen again. It may not be as severe and may not take us by surprise, and we'll be prepared, but business owners should be prepared for this to hit us again. They've seen, and historically, these type of events, some have an after effect to them 6 months later, 7 months later, and they've pretty much identified that may be the case here in the fall sometime. So this is just the preliminary or the prep work for what they want their business to look like if this occurs again. So I would tell them it's a reality check. They're not bulletproof. People that run businesses, often I'm to blame for this as well, is you take things for granted. You take things for granted as far as revenue, your employees, your customers, et cetera, thinking this is just the normal state of things. So get out of that reality, get an out-of-body experience about thinking a little further ahead about this and what would happen the next time it occurs. The second piece is really about looking at your employees. As Mitch has said, trying to rehire that entire effort of losing talent and then replacing it is mind-boggling, to say the least. But having the reality to understand that if people have been home with their families for a month or 6 weeks, they're going to come back to work with a different value system. So depending on what your company value and culture is, be ready for a shift or a change from your employees as far as how they look at their work-life balance. If they've spent time doing that and they found out there's some things they like about being at home with the family or more time with the family, they're going to come back with a slightly different attitude. So business owners have to look at the culture and recognize that, as well as the fact that some employees may really have enjoyed the working from home reality. So how will that pay attention to how they come back out of the chute on this thing? And will that be something they offer to people in the future that are employees? Those would be the things I really would tell you. And then the last piece, of course, is just remodeling the business around remote management. So RMR type services or managed service security processes are things that can be done remotely from different places. And instead of rolling the truck, depending on the technology you have deployed out there or the new technology you may deploy out there, being able to manage that and to punch into it and to make adjustments to the databases and test without rolling that truck is going to be more and more important when you can't roll the truck.
Mm-hmm. And I think, thank you, Paul. I think Peter and yourself started to touch on it, but digging a little deeper, are there some specific products or system solutions that you think are going to emerge, coming out of this in the aftermath? Like, they're talking about new technologies with video or access that can help monitor, contagions and things like that. So maybe more biometrics. Paul, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely so. So there's going to be two elements to this. Number one is there's going to be the rush of hype of people bringing stuff and trying to apply it to the problem where it may not really be the right solution, either overpriced or not tested. So I would tell everybody, be a little bit of aware and a little bit skeptical of what's coming at you. But the reality of the thing is that I covered a product last year that did speed face. I think it was by ZK Techo. But that product was really interesting because it solved a couple problems with biometrics on the face and or palm. It made it all weather and it made it bigger and it could do it at 30 degrees. So by itself, that technology for biometrics, and it would be able to connect really to any existing access control system, was really cool. And what they did is they stepped it up and they put a thermal camera on it now. So this thing just released out about, 2 weeks ago, somewhere in that. But it'll tell you within 2 feet, if you walk up this thing, that you have a temperature and it's going to deny access. And it will also detect face masks. So that's kind of a pretty cool one. Cybersecurity. So the newer cybersecurity projects out there and companies like Defendify that allow their dealers to have their own kind of customized portal to their customers. Cybersecurity, the more we step out in the remote area, the more we're going to need it. And more important than that is the higher rate the attacks will come at us. Once the attackers and hackers recognize that we are now remotely away from our offices and calling in, a lot of companies don't really have the hygiene in that area to really protect themselves. So that becomes a real opportunity for people that want to kind of crash in and steal data. And then finally, again, the remote services piece, access control. And there's a company called Arculus that is kind of launched out from Milestone, and they do cloud work, but they do it in a really unique way, which is kind of interesting. They had an example in February at the show I covered where they actually had a New York integrator that converted somewhere around 150 sites, somewhere around 10,000 users, 10,000 cameras. Globally, they never stepped foot in any of the facilities. Now, if you can imagine that for a minute, right, that I can remotely go in there, reconfigure, and put you into a gateway and then bring everything back to me and do all the processing without ever putting a technician inside a building. That's pretty amazing stuff. So.
Wow, outstanding. Thank you. Peter, have a little deeper dive on some of the, products or services you think might particularly grow in the aftermath of this. And you have, your finger on the pulse of monitoring. Maybe it's monitored services.
Well, I think it's all related, but as Paul said, remote video and remote access, although has great legs now, I think the enhancements will continue, and I think you're going to see much more growth in that area. I mean, again, with the monitoring centers, obviously a lot of my clients both in my telecom business and my consulting business, are medium to very large scale 24/7 monitoring centers. And you could imagine, the effect on them right now. And it's amazing. They've all taken, although there's some similarities, some of them have taken drastically different approaches. I have some clients where 100% of their operators are operating from home now, where others, 100% of their operators are still in, but they've put the thermal cameras in to measure temperature as everyone walks in to make sure they gain access. And if they're over a certain threshold, then they go to another station where someone manually checks their temperature. They're giving thermometers to employees to take home with them, so they can actually check their own temperature every day before they come in. Taking, non-essential people, moving them out so you can spread your operators out. So, the remote, the whole point is, and to your question, the remote access and the remote video, I believe you're going to see, growth in that area, and it's going to step up into what other emerged technologies are coordinated with that. Moving on from that, and again, another remote service, and this is an area I work in anyway, and I've worked in for decades, but more importantly, quite a bit for the last 5 years or so, is remote patient monitoring, and not just for ill people, but for anybody. I mean, especially seniors, but for really anybody. A lot of times it's combined with an in-home PERS, but these days, because it's been more recognized, sometimes people don't even opt for the PERS option, where blood ox, temperature, weight, blood pressure is all monitored every day, goes up to a portal. Loved ones could see it on their app. And obviously, in some cases, it's integrated with the hospital systems or the doctor systems. And again, that's before this happened, that's been having exponential growth, especially with the Medicare reimbursement. Now with this and all the telemedicine that's taking place, and you hear telehealth on the news every day, this is really going to be a crazy boost for that. I mean, it's like I said, it had great acceleration before this. Now it's going to go much further, and I think you're going to see more people engaging, although it's really not for everybody. But the reality of it is that's a technology. I think you're going to see engagement more from folks on our side of the fence. Other things that, again, are related, and most companies that we work with, when I say we're as an industry, most companies I work with actually do this, but most people as a security industry is something called UCaaS, which is hosted telephone systems. And although that, again, has had great acceleration, where a lot of security and integrators also do telephone systems, currently 70% of new deployment of systems are deployed in the cloud. Only 30% are premise-based now. And that's been accelerating every year. Right now, and again, I deal with this on two ends as a consultant, but I also have a telecom business, so I get to see both ends. The folks that already had engagement with that, whether they had it for a DR or whether they had it just because they integrated it very intuitively, their move to have a remote workforce was really not even an effort for them. It was more, it wasn't a technical effort. Obviously, it was a logistical effort. The others who tried to deploy afterwards, it's a little bit of an effort, but, after 2 or 3 days, they got it straight. I think you're going to see a lot more organizations get involved with that because, first of all, it brings efficiency anyway. But again, this is something else. We could go backwards, tie into the access, tie into the remote video, and just to have everybody as nimble as possible. And, as Paul said, and a lot of your integrators are involved in this in one way or another, is getting involved in, network infrastructure and network security, whether it's through relationships or whether it's themselves, because, again, a lot of these integrators are dealing with networks anyway because of their IP video, their IP access, and IP security. So, I think building that up, because that's, there's a real vacuum there, and it's problematic. And we've talked about it. I've written articles in SSI about it. Others have written articles about it, where, everything with the IoT and everything having an IP address that we deal with right now, I mean, virtually everything, a lot of people forget about internet security. And whether it's a bodega, whether it's a Fortune 100 company, or whether it's a condo on the beach, everybody's just as vulnerable, and everybody has information that's vulnerable that the bad guys want. So I think you're going to see more engagement with that end from our side. We should have. And again, you could go back in articles. We've been talking about it for years. But now, as Paul had stated, you have so many people working from home. You have so many things going on. That's going to continue in one facet or another. So, having that security is extremely important. I think that covers about my thoughts.
Thank you, Peter. I think we're going to see back to this, that this will be a tipping point for a lot of those technologies that were kind of burgeoning, if you will. Be very interesting to follow that side of it. Mitch, what are your thoughts on products and systems in demand and big growth opportunities coming out of this, do you think?
I'm not much on the product side, but I do hear what my clients are talking about. And one thing that I see is more reliance on supervised access control. I think they're seeing now the dangers in a pandemic and an epidemic like this of having one-on-one contact with standing security guards and standing security personnel. So some of my clients that do that type of business are starting to see more interest in that, and I think it'll carry on through the pandemic. I think there's going to be more interest in technology to enable people to work from home and make sure that there's security, and more companies worried about cybersecurity, which is something I think that traditional security companies should definitely be looking at. I'm not much on the product side. I don't really focus on the product side, and all I hear is what my clients are talking about. So I'm going to leave it to our two other experts here to tell you more about the product.
Fair enough. Thanks, Mitch. Well, let's talk big picture a little bit. What do you think ultimately, the industry is going to look like from a 30,000-foot view coming out of this? I mean, the companies will be stronger, hopefully more resilient. How long do you think the impact will be on the industry? Those kinds of things. So we'll go back around again, and Mitch, I'll let you take first crack at that one.
Well, my background is business. I'm an accountant by training, and I even though I've been in the industry for 25 years and I have an alarm license, I technically couldn't install an alarm to save my life. But I've been telling companies, especially the smaller companies, for years that you need to recognize the fact that this is a business and you need to operate more like a business. And technical know-how is extremely important. Marketing ability is extremely important. But being able to run the back office of your business, be able to operate like a business, is becoming more and more important. And one of the biggest reasons we're seeing now is that there's so many more things, products and services out there that we have to be able to manage and deal with. And the capital requirements of these products are so much more. We first started seeing it in the late 80s and 90s with subsidized systems and not being able to get quite the full amount of install costs when the industry started to follow the cell phone model. And a lot of companies have held out and been okay doing that for years. But now you're getting into situations where customers are expecting cameras and thermostat interconnections and home automation and things like that for a little bit lower upfront price and more RMR in the future. And to businesses that don't have good financial reporting, that don't have good costing even on the installs that they're putting in for profit, that aren't monitoring their RMR very well, and especially what we're finding out lately is that don't have a relationship with their banks. A lot of companies are finding out how important it was to have a relationship with your bank. We're getting calls left and right about these SBA programs, and all they've ever dealt with is a teller at their local bank, and they call over there to get a loan, a $150,000 payroll loan to stay in business, and nobody knows who they are. It's super critical to step back and not run your business for the sake of running a business, but recognize the fact that you are a business and you are a for-profit entity, and margins count, and buying at right prices count, and consistency of how you pay your vendors, and consistency of how you treat your vendor relationships, your ability to get reporting out of your accounting system for more than just billing your customers and filing your tax returns. My clients run the gamut from people that can tell you exactly why their customers canceled last month and what the reasons were and what they've done to correct it, to people that don't even know how many customers they have and how much RMR they have. And everybody's in between those two. And I think it's very important to understand that this has been a tremendous wake-up call, that cash flow is king. And the way to stay in business is to manage cash flow and have reserves and be able to make the tough times. And the businesses are going to do the best, the ones that not just survived here, but got out and competed during this crisis time. Then I realize my background is business, but I can't overstress how important it is to start operating your business like a business.
Very good. Thank you, Mitch. Peter, what do you think a year from now, 3 years from now, what ultimate impact might we see this having on the way the industry works and, its growth and that sort of thing?
Well, I think from the unfortunate standpoint, I think some of the folks that did not run their business as a business, as Mitch said, there's going to be some fallout, right? Not everybody's going to survive, and that's going to be really unfortunate. I think those who survive, I really think you're going to see some adherence to some really, a lot of the best practices that everybody should always adhere to. So I think, rebuilding those teams properly, especially the stars that help companies get to where they are, help them get over this hump, I think is really important. And I think that's kind of a short-term thing, because you got to get your coordination, your efficiency back, and you have to have strong people. You put that together and combine that with best practices of the leadership that'll allow for a stronger, healthier business when things are going well, and obviously allow for the ability to persevere through challenging times as this, or other challenging times that we're assured to come across. I think from a longer standpoint, I said it again, I might have said it twice. I mean, replenishing cash is really going to be important, and maybe it's going to give new meaning to having the proper cash reserves and what they mean. And it's not just for just a cloudy day. It's for when the skies are falling down, and replenishing the pipeline, because this is I'm sure a lot of projects that are on hold, unfortunately, may get canceled. I mean, they've been postponed at the best, but they're going to get canceled. And others, the pipelines will fill back up. So I think from a longer standpoint, folks that are restarting, small, mid-size, and large companies, are going to have to refill those pipelines as they get things done and move forward. And one of the things I'm curious of, and I was just wondering what Mitch's opinion would be on this, is a concern of valuations of organizations, whether they're integrators and security companies. I mean, we came into this, and for those of us who are at the Barnes Conference, we saw and we experienced, folks that live it in the M&A world, that valuations have been not as robust or steady as they've been in the past. Now, what's this going to do to valuations, just because there's going to be such turmoil in the industry? And I don't know if I don't think anyone's going to have really the magic answer, but my gut tells me that because we went into this a little shaky, I think it's going to be a little bit of time before the valuations get back to where where everybody hopes they should be. So I think that's a big one. That's a big long-term one that I think people are going to be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to comment on that at all, Mitch?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that Peter brought up, and we've seen a lot of turbulence. I do about 25 or 30 valuations a year of security companies, integrators, and fire companies, for divorces, for partner disputes, for IRS purposes, for probate issues. And what I see out there is I think that we've gotten into a situation where multiples had gotten a little high. And then last fall, we had some issues with some larger mass market companies collapsing. And there were reasons for that that were unrelated to 90% of the industry, but it got a lot of attention for equity money, thinking twice about the industry, for a couple of banks pulling out. And we went to the Barnes Buchanan conference in February, and they said the sky's falling. And what do you know, 30 days later, the sky was falling. And in this industry, what you have to realize is that your value is based on your cash flow. And different companies have different cash flow. No two companies are alike. And it's almost like if you go to a marathon race, you'll have a group of people that can run that marathon in 3 or 4 hours, and they're competing to be the first place winner. And then you have a whole bunch of guys that ate a cheeseburger last night, and they're headed out with their marathon bib on, and they're a marathon runner. And it's the same way in this industry. Not all companies are that front-running marathon runner that's out there doing stuff. Some of them ate the cheeseburger last night, and you've got to decide what kind of company you want to be and how you want to be valued and how you're going to get through this situation. when I was a teenager, I was real interested in sailing. And I read an article one time about these survival races, and it said, quit surviving and start racing. And what their theory was, and it was a good theory, was instead of trying to just stay alive and stay afloat out there in this race, realize that everybody else is struggling and quit struggling. Just plain quit struggling. Look for opportunities everywhere you go. Look for ways to manage your company. Look for ways to keep your cash flow up, and not worry so much about the external factors you can't control, but control what you can control. And just because somebody's saying that multiples are coming down and businesses aren't worth what they used to be, that shouldn't affect you if you've got a strong customer base with loyal customers and a good service department and good employees. If you start doing things like focusing on the wrong segment, like trying to address factors that really aren't a threat, like DIY and some other issues, and if you let go of a lot of really talented employees during this crisis because you don't think you can afford them and then never get them back again, you could end up not being able to survive. If you take advantage of the situation, if you do like Paul said, and you look for employees that have a lot of talent that have been displaced by a company that didn't know how to manage their business, and hire some talent, and are able to take advantage of some programs, are able to get some money, and are shifting more from this non-recurring one-off stuff into recurring revenue, even for inspections and even for service agreements, and even sometimes to some extent for leases, you're more positioned to weather these storms and your valuation is going to go up. So yes, I think that valuations are down. I think valuations are inflated, but I think the valuation is going to be all over the board because some people just plain run their company better than others do.
Excellent. Thank you. Paul,
Yes.
what do you see a year out from now, 3 years from now? What do you see? What do you hope to see?
Yeah. So I got to agree with what has been said already. So cash flow and running your business the way you should run a business. I think this is going to be the biggest wake-up call in the short term. Those that did business almost in spite of themselves are going to have a real hard look at the mirror, and survival rates on them in the short term. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see failures in those areas. So I think that will happen. Short term, advice is that when your employees come back and your strong employees come back, you really need to listen to them. So asking the question of how they get through this and how you as a company get through that, if they were willing to open their ears and listen to their employees, they're going to get better results because everybody's in the same boat, and it's not about surviving, as Mitch said, it's how do you strive. So if they open their ears and listen to their employees, they're going to get some better ideas, and they're going to have more cohesiveness to stick together through the tough times of regrowing the business. The one part that's kind of interesting is the do-it-yourself. Everybody's been scared to death of this. Everybody's been writing about it. But I will tell you, I think the do-it-yourselfers in those ilk are going to actually benefit from this, because as some of the weaker companies come out of this without the cash flow they need to sustain and grow, I think you're going to see DIY pick up some percentage points. So I don't know that that's scary or not scary, but I just think that will probably happen. And then longer term, the private equity and the valuation questions that Mitch addressed really well and Peter brought up, that's a real key element. So I think they've been inflated over the years. I think this is going to really ground it. This is like a lightning bolt to the ground. The private equities, but that have been doing the roll-ups with the system integrators, are really going to be feeling this event right here, because if your cash is all based on projects, most of the big integrator roll-ups are really struggling right at the moment because of projects on hold. And those ones that are hold, I think, as Peter might have said, those funds might go away. Just they're on hold now, but the companies that are going through this as well as clients are managing their cash as well and their employees. So I think there's going to be a longer term ripple effect. Short term, I think we can get through it. The ones that are not strong enough are just going to fall by the wayside. The strong ones and the ones that are aggressive and want to strive, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow and expand and get market share.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Paul. Any final thoughts? And also, if you have any resources you would like to recommend to viewers as well, Paul, any final thought?
Just pick yourself up. So it's what I tell my clients. It's like, people get so down when you have these kind of events. Well, we haven't had this type of event in our lifetime, but I put it this way: it's like walking through a minefield. Now, there's two type of people. There's people that you pick your head up and look out at the horizon, right, and have some faith and some guts to get through the minefield. And then those people that put their eyes right on the ground and they look 3 feet in front of them for every step. Right. So you really have to decide between those two those two ideas is where are you going to be? Are you going to be bold enough to step forward, carefully, of course, or you can have your eyes right on the ground with every nickel that you spend, every decision you make will absolutely retard your growth, right? And can be detrimental. If you look too far out in the horizon and just let this thing pass, you're not going to learn the lessons that it's taught us. So that would be kind of my final thought.
Thank you. Peter, final thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for the large scale integrators, the ones that Paul had mentioned that are more project centric. And again, I've said this for years, and I guess because I've been around a long time, I hopefully got away with it without insulting anybody. I always felt that the large scale integrators, they were snobs to recurring revenue. I mean, I've said it to friends, and others have come a long way. Whether the recurring revenue come from monitoring services or others. I just think that this hopefully would be a strong lesson for everybody and anybody, but especially those who are snobs to the recurring revenue, that you don't need a screwdriver or a jackhammer to make money. And there's a variety of things, in addition monitoring the most obvious, but there's other things that are relative. And I think that integrators should cross over to offering a more holistic solutions that would provide additional recurring revenue that are just not bolt-on things that are cool in their technology, the things that are actually related to what they do. And it'll obviously help during times like this, but more important, it'll bring better value to the clients and give them revenue streams. So I think that that's really extremely important. And the things that are related to, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's UCAS, whether it's network management, things to that effect. I mean, I see, and part of the reason why, I opened a telecom agency is because some organizations want to take it upon themselves, and that's good. So they become competition, but others just want to partners with others. And we see a lot of collaboration in our industry. And I think that more, whether it's a security installing deal or integrators, just really need to build on that. And again, Paul had said it more than once. You go through tough times, whether it's tough times like this, which we've never seen, whether it's just a tough economic time where projects are on hold. Some organizations, mid-size and large, I mean, it kills them. And when you have that recurring, as everyone knows who are primarily recurring centric, life could go on. It gets you over that hump, and maybe you don't have to change your lifestyle. So I just think that final word, just look at more holistic approaches, whether it's something that takes a jackhammer or whether it doesn't.
Very good, thank you, Peter. Mitch, what do you got for us? Final word.
There's a great book that all economics students read called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. It was written in the early 19th century, and it talks about all the crazy delusional things that have happened to populations and the humans in history and how we got through it. And what you got to do is step back and not be part of the crowd and think rationally and look at things and read a history book and see how the human experience has constantly gone from boom to bust, from boom to bust, from boom to bust. And every time we get too fat and happy, something comes along to remind us of what happened. And I was watching last night on TV, there was the food bank had a food giveaway to people that were starving, and there were 300 or 400 cars in it. They waited all day. And I was seeing Corvettes and Porsches and Lexuses and Mercedes in there. And the people were saying, I know I have a nice car and I know I have a nice lifestyle, but I don't have a paycheck and I'm starving. And I feel sorry for them. It's sad that they were starving, but let's stop and think about this. If they really didn't have any cash in the bank and they couldn't make it for 3 weeks of lockdown, do they really need to be out there buying a Mercedes or a Porsche or a Corvette? And should they not have thought about the fact that not everything's guaranteed, not everything's out there? And if you're running a business, you got to stop and think, can I really make payroll with a Lamborghini? You've got to put money aside. You've got to plan for the bad times, not dwell on them, but plan for the bad times to be able to pull through. Because I look at my client base and I see a lot of very talented, very bright people that are figuring out ways to get through this. And we're working on ways to get through this. And we're working on strategies. And they're going to come out, like Paul was talking about, with some really talented people that are going to fall off from other companies and join their companies. And some really good customers aren't going to get service and are going to leave and come to their companies. And they're going to retain their good employees. And they're going to retain their good customers because they planned ahead. They thought. They didn't get fat and happy. and they didn't fear the downside, but they didn't take advantage of it. They just did the right thing and they got through it. So stay tough, wash your hands, keep your people apart, and let's all get together at the other side of the curve and see who's done the best.
Excellent advice. Great advice from everybody. Thank you guys so much, gentlemen. Much appreciated. I hope you found that very valuable. Security Sales and Integration will continue to keep industry professionals informed with news and developments related to COVID-19, as well as its usual timely security business and technology content. For the latest specifically related to the pandemic, plug in securitysales.com/tag/coronavirus. I'd like to again express my gratitude to our distinguished panel. Thank you very much to all of them. In closing, be smart, be safe, and always take pride in the important societal role our industry plays in protecting people and property. Bye for now.